Ain't no shame in this game. Implicit Bias Radio is back on the air. We're going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And by the ugly, I mean me. I'm your host, Kevon Bordelon, and Implicit Bias Radio is on the air for another 2 hours of topics we're really not supposed to have in polite conversations. We're going to introduce you to the crew in just a minute, and we're going to get you up to speed on our weekly whiskeys. But first, the problem the world just can't quite get past this week. As is all too common on this show, the problem is spelled out actually in the good book. It's a problem we've been warned about for over 2,000 years, and it's a problem we need to address in the worst way. Because this problem, it's taking over. See, when we started the show this week, we said ain't no shame in this game. But maybe, just maybe, we should have some shame. See, shame is a word for a reason. Shame has been used for thousands of years, and it's more relevant today than maybe it's ever been. Shame, for those non-English majors out there, has a negative connotation. You know, denotation is the definition of the word. Connotation is the sentiment around the word. In other words, what does the word infer? Shame infers that it's something we should be embarrassed for others to know. But that, shame, has been shamed in the last few years. See, we've actually adopted a thought process in the last 10 years or so that we shouldn't shame people for certain behaviors. The connotation is that we shouldn't judge others. But here's the problem with the no shame movement. The good book says we shouldn't judge lest we be judged. In other words, we shouldn't shame others. But leftists, crazy, demented, depraved, despicable people, think that means that we shouldn't be shamed of our own behaviors either. Now, the good book says don't judge others. What it does mean is that we can absolve ourselves of what we think of what others do. What it doesn't mean is that we can't absolve ourselves of our own bad behaviors. We shouldn't be proud of the things we should be ashamed of in our own lives. We're even told by Jesus himself that the mark of a bad person is out there. He actually tells us in Philippians 3:17, "For many as I have often told you, and now tell you even in tears, conduct themselves as enemies of the cross of Christ." Their end is destruction. Their God is their stomach. Their glory is in their shame. Now follow the logic here. If Christian beliefs amount to love thy neighbor, if you're Catholic, if you claim to be Catholic, Jesus' teaching here is absolutely paramount. He tells us who the enemies of God are. It's those who should be ashamed of what they are doing, but instead, they're proud of it. Pride. That, take however you will take it, is the enemy. Lack of shame is the enemy. And today, we've got way too many of us that aren't ashamed of our own terrible behaviors. And to be clear, we all, every single one of us, everyone here in the top secret podcast layer, that's the TSPL for the uninitiated, we've all got stuff to be ashamed of. We're all trying to be good Christians, some of us Catholics, but we won't succeed in being perfect. That only happened once, and we're all waiting on that one to come back. But, and this is a big old Sir Mix-a-Lot but in this philosophy, is that we have to recognize that some of us will never recognize our own shame. Some of us until it's too late. Since we are in Lent, we should really spend some time reflecting on that, specifically on Judas. Yeah, Judas. Why? Here's why. Because Judas didn't realize what he should have been ashamed of till it was way too late. I mean, stop and think about that for a second. Think about the miracles he witnessed. Think about all the wonders he was privy to. Yet he still thought his way, not God's way, was better. 1 out of every 12. That's all it takes. Think about it. That's all it takes to betray the miraculous ways of God. But really think about that for a second. Think about 12 of your good friends. Those are probably great people, but at least one of us, no matter what we show them, no matter how hard we argue, the truth can sit on their face and wiggle, and they won't see it. There's your Judas. There's your person whose glory comes from their shame. It doesn't mean that they're beyond redemption. I mean, we're all redeemable, but our glory resting in what we should be ashamed of, it's how evil works and tries to win us over. Our glory in what should be our shame here on this show, because as I said, we're guilty of it too, might just be our weekly whiskey tasting. We'll try to keep our weekly whiskey tasting to a tasting instead of something we should be ashamed of. We'll tell you that this should be a hobby, not a habit. We'll give you our ratings of this week's spirit. We'll introduce you to the crew when Implicit Bias Radio resumes. Another exciting week of Implicit Bias Radio. I am your host, Kavan Bordelon. We've got a great crew coming to you from the TSPL, sponsored by Mr. Lester Steakhouse of Cypress Bayou Casino. That is the top secret podcast lair for the uninitiated on the show or our new listeners. By the way, if you miss any part of this show, if you want to go back and catch past episodes, find us on all of our socials. You can catch us on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on X. We're all over, or just hit our website, www.implicitbiasradio.com. So, who is here with the crew that we maybe should be ashamed of, and we aren't, but maybe we are? Let's start with the one we might be the most ashamed of. He is the rustic renegade. He is Caleb Morris. I knew you could handle the joke, good. Caleb, so I had to throw it out there. I'm glad to have you back.
Great to be back. Great to be here in the TSPL and enjoying. I'm hoping I enjoy the whiskey and the weather.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. The weather's fantastic, and I see you are trying to bring back the tan, the myth, the legend.
I'm getting there. Once I'm done molting, I'll be there.
At the bar, we have Jonathan Broussard of Industrial Fabrication Services. Jonathan, how are you? Great to have you back here in the TSPL.
Great to be back. Shamefully happy to be back.
Shamefully happy. I appreciate that. And of course, we have the chef, Chef Willie Gaspard of Cypress Bayou Casino. He's not only the executive chef of Mr. Lester's, he's also the food and beverage manager for the whole 9 yards. And we're going to talk about some of the things that we got coming up because you've been working on some stuff, Chef.
Absolutely. We have some exciting things coming.
I am thrilled to hear and I can't wait to see, because I got one text and I was told that you had more stuff coming and I never got that picture from you.
I have them. Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll talk about that later on the show. We're going to start by diving into our weekly whiskey, head first into the glass, which maybe we should be ashamed that we do this every week. It's a hobby, not a habit, or at least it should be a hobby, not a habit. And we do our best to keep it as a tasting for those who find this enjoyable responsibly. We have with us, Caleb, I'm going to let you introduce it, even though it's sitting next to me. Horse Soldier. Now, this is a veteran-owned whiskey, which is why Caleb went...
I got nervous when I walked in because...
well, first of all, let's start with you and veteran-owned whiskeys.
Yeah, look, I love my fellow vets. There's plenty of things we do right. Bourbon, historically, has not been one of them, and I'm saying that into the camera. I met one of the gentlemen from 12 Strong, which is where the Horse Soldier comes from. Horse Soldier, it was the 595th ODA, if memory serves right, into Afghanistan. I don't remember which person it was. He came into Louisiana, heard about the radio show while we were there. We were talking about it, and he autographed 2 bottles for me. And me being the kind of person that collects bourbon...
You drank the whole thing.
I opened it up and said, let's drink it right now. And we shared a glass. He took the first sip, and he's like, oh, what is... You get this on the palate, you get this, you get that, and what do you think? And I was like... I hate it.
Yeah, because you are a whiskey snob.
I can be. And I explained to him why. And maybe it's because it was still brand new, still very new. It was young. It was too, I don't want to say too aggressive, but it was too aggressive. The flavor wasn't right. It was trying to be too much, and it wasn't true to who it was. That being said, I had, year before last, a single barrel, maybe, or a barrel strength Horse Soldier.
Okay.
And it was damn good. And I know that this one here is the barrel strength. Yeah, 122 point, what was it? 122.8. No age statement. It's still distilled by the American Freedom Distillery. Well, it's bottled by them.
Okay.
I don't know who makes it.
Yeah, we don't know if it's their juice or not. Their
Yeah.
liquid might not be old enough just yet.
Correct. And one of the cool things they do is the mold for these bottles are made from reclaimed steel from the World Trade Center from September 11th. They put their patriotism into every bottle. I haven't taken a sip yet out of this one. I'm hoping that it's as good as what I remember from the last one that I had, because my fear is that first sip will always come back to haunt me. So I'm looking forward to it. The color on this one's great. Haven't even smelled it yet. So we'll find out soon.
All right. Well, let's go to the bar and let's get initial reactions from the bar first. We'll introduce Walker in a minute because Walker's actually not consuming due to the Lenten season that I referenced in the monologue. So let's start at the bar. Chef, we might as well start with you because the microphone's pointed at you first. I'm curious as to your thoughts on this Horse Soldier cask strength at 122.
It's very harsh.
Okay.
So I don't drink many bourbons.
Well, that's and yeah, we need you talking to the microphone. Make sure we can hear you.
I don't drink many bourbons, but this is very hard to drink
For you, okay.
for me. I taste some cherry. I taste a little smoky flavor, but it's harsh, very harsh.
And you typically are a wine drinker.
Yes.
I know you well enough to know that you like your wine. So your palate with regards to wine is very refined.
Yes.
This a little different and obviously going to be a little more harsh because wine is certainly not going to carry 61% alcohol and change.
What I had here the last time, that New News blend,
Yep.
that was great.
Okay.
I could drink the whole bottle of that.
Well, this actually came from that particular weekly whiskey partner in our weekly whiskey network. So this is available there as well. And we're going to talk about the pricing, but you do get a little cherry on the palate. You find it a little aggressive.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm all right with that. Jonathan, what about you? You drink a little more whiskey kind of like I do.
Well, you know,
Maybe not as much, which I
Maybe
should be
not as
ashamed
much.
of.
it's basic to me. It's not a bad drink. It's not the greatest of them. It goes down pretty easy to me, but I do feel the burn in my chest like a minute after.
That warmth in the
That
chest,
warmth.
which I actually
Yes,
like.
Yes. And to me, the flavors are very mild. Like I get some sweetness out of it, but it's almost like a honeydew melon sweetness where it's kind of
Subtle sweetness.
easy and subtle. Yeah. It's beautiful color in it. Beautiful color.
So I get on this one, I first of all, I do get the warmth. I don't get 122 on the drink. I think this drink's smoother than 122, especially if you follow those old school rules of whiskey consumption, which is swallow and exhale. You don't get that Kentucky hug where you get that aggression. I get spice on this, like this could be a high rye mash bill. I do get that little bit of pepper. I do get cherry. I do get that, maybe not necessarily cherry. I get almost cherry wood. So almost like a cherry wood smoke on this. I get a little hint of caramel. I don't get a ton of depth of caramel on it, but I do get that hint of sweetness. So you get those traditional bourbon flavors that you expect. I like the way that this drinks, to me, smoother than 122 proof. I think if you give this to somebody who is not accustomed to whiskey, though, they're going to have the reaction that Chef does. I think this is a consistent whiskey drinker's whiskey, if that makes sense. Because if you don't drink enough whiskey, this might be a little too much of a punch in the mouth. But for those who have become proof hounds, much like we are on the show, where we like 110, we like 115, 120, 128. This might be kind of in that wheelhouse.
Yeah, typically you guys, well, my area is always about 100, 105, but you guys have raised that bar for me. But now we're getting into the 20s, so there's a little different for my palate, for sure.
Yeah, it's got a long finish. It's a little oily. It's got good viscosity to it for me. On the nose, it's hard to pick out a nose. What I think I'm getting is that cardamom type aroma that's a little deep, a little pungent, just a bit, with a hint of sweetness to it. That's what hits me on the nose. And then that first sip absolutely follows. Now, Walker has not had a sip. So we are going to skip Walker. Walker, say hi to everybody here in the TSPL.
Hello, everyone.
Because I know you're watching March Madness, because that's what you do.
Yes.
Because you bet on games, because that's what you do.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. All right. That's okay. We're going to keep you in our thoughts. We hope you win, Walker. Let's go to the description that we have to have on every episode of Implicit Bias Radio. He is the Rustic Renegade, and he does come up with the most inanely accurate descriptions of whiskey that we could ever think about. So, Caleb, first of all, does this pass the test for good whiskey from a vet? Because that's a huge hurdle for you.
Yeah, like they're getting better.
Yeah.
They're, like this, I'm okay with them doing. Citrus on the nose, like a Satsuma or another small orange, maybe a kumquat or something like a small
I
citrus.
hate you. I hate you because I can't verbalize that. And the second you said it, I went, oh, he's right.
It's because it's gentle, it's soft. Then I get like a red hot, not cinnamon, but like a red hot. It's that cinnamon sweet. But it's faint. It's soft. It's fleeting. But if you shake your glass when you smell it, it gets a little bit more aggressive, I found, on the nose. So because I find
so as it breathes a little bit, get some oxygen underneath.
Get some oxygen, agitate the glass, and the scent will get a little more pungent, I think, because it's getting oxygenated and filling the glass more. From there onto the palate, I got cherry sours, like an artificial cherry, the cherry sours, and red Twizzlers. That's the sweet I get in the middle, or Twizzlers.
I told you, the most inanely accurate descriptions of whiskey.
And then it becomes sharp and pointy.
It is sharp. Yeah, I agree.
I find that the flavors don't blend very, very cleanly. They're abrupt new and starts. I put sharp and pointy. Then it's mid palate's a little acidic, followed by what I call a young and awkward finish. I think it tries to finish cleanly. It's got some legs to it. It wants to continue, but it's choppy. It's like driving the first time you drove a standard and you finally got to third gear and you had to downshift and you were bopping back and forth and couldn't figure out how to work the clutch. That's how awkward this finishes.
See, I'm going to call you out here because I'm going to disagree with you here a bit. And look, I love the description, but I don't necessarily agree with it, and here's why. You had something sweet and fruity right before you tasted this. So your taste buds might not have gotten...
Oh, I did.
Yeah, you did because you brought it in.
I did.
You might have your taste buds offset a bit.
Valid point.
And you might be pulling those flavors back out through your taste bud, basically memory, for lack of a better term.
It still finishes awkward to me. I'm gonna drink more.
I like the finish. I think the finish is long. I think it's a full finish.
It's got a lot of flavor, but it's just... I would like it to be...
So is this like awkward 13-year-old first middle school dance and there's a girl there that you've been wanting to dance with and you gotta run away?
Yeah, it's
is
like
that awkward like that?
It's like I tried to hold your hand. Oop, I touched your butt. I don't know what to do. Sorry.
Hey, don't ask me how I know that accurate description. I'm just saying.
We've all been there once. Walker's still there. But it's like it knows what to do. It knows how to play the game. It's just not there yet. I think that it's probably a little young. If this is their juice, give it another 2 years. There's no age statement on it.
No.
Give it another 2 years or so. This could be something phenomenal.
I agree. I think with a little more age, it would absolutely probably set a little more and might be a little softer on the palate at this type of proof. It's got the fundamentals and the foundation, no doubt.
Oh yeah, at 122 and some change, it doesn't drink like it. I would say this is about a 98 to 100 proof. Like it drinks pretty smooth.
So what we're going to do is we're going to try this with some water and whiskey in a minute because we haven't brought that out on the show. And I think this particular bourbon is going to benefit from some water and whiskey, some proofing water that we have here on the show. And I think that it might change our rating. And I'm going to hold off on the rating. We're going to play What Would You Pay for the What Would You Pay Championship Belt Chain before we go to break. But we're going to hold off on the rating because I want this one to get some oxygen, maybe a couple drops of water and whiskey in it before we start to rate this. I think I know where this is going to sit with me. I don't think water and whiskey is going to change it, but I think it's probably a great opportunity for us to say let's play with the proof just a bit. Just a bit, because even a couple of points down, just that little bit of dilution could really change the flavor profile of this particular whiskey. So let's play What Would You Pay for the What Would You Pay Championship Belt Chain presented by Box Drop of Lafayette. Jonathan, if you would, hold up that chain and shake it so people can see it and hear it, because you got to flip it over. It's upside down. There we go, because people can see us now, which, by the way, if you want to see us, X, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, here's how the game works. You're going to say what you think this particular liquid would be worth. If you are closest to the number, you win and get to wear the What Would You Pay Championship Belt Chain for the remainder of this week's show. Tons of fun. Caleb, we're going to start with you.
All right. So because it's American made, I'm going to give it a 20% jump. I want to say $63, multiplied by 1.2, $75.60.
$75.60. Okay, we're now trying to incorporate math into the What Would You Pay Championship Belt Chain. I like it. What's the meme? I'll allow it. Okay, so let's go. Let's go to the bar. Who's going to start? Jonathan, you're going to start. What would you pay?
I'm going to hope that because it's veteran owned, it's a little bit more expensive because they donate into something
Okay.
important. So I'm going to say 85.
85. Chef,
I'm going to go in the middle at 80.
go in the middle at 80. Okay. I love this because with a whiskey like this, and I like this whiskey. I think this is a good bourbon to drink, and that kind of helps outline where I think I'm going to fall on the Morse Whiskey Rating Code. When we do that, we'll probably do it actually in the end of hour one, maybe hour two, but we're going to rate this later. I would buy it, absolutely. But everyone here overshot the price.
Really?
Yep. Everyone here overshot the price, not by a ton. This is a $73.29 bottle of whiskey, which means the What Would You Pay Championship Belt Chain presented by Box Drop gets to be worn by the Rustic Renegade, Caleb Morse, for the rest of the show. It's been a while since you've won, Caleb.
It's been a little minute. It has. Math helped me out today, baby.
Math helped you out today. Yeah, because look, the bigger thing is, I think when we talk whiskey and when we talk ratings and when we talk cost and when we talk all of these things, sometimes we forget really what drinking whiskey should be about, in our opinion. It's Implicit Bias Radio. We get to have it. Drinking whiskey should be about sitting around, sharing a beverage with special people that will create special memories. And sometimes a part of that just comes from where the whiskey came from.
The story behind the glass.
Correct. So to me, the story behind this glass is incredibly important. The story behind the people who made this is incredibly important. We care for, we thank, we are highly appreciative of our veteran community on this show. And this comes from our veteran community. So the fact that we all said, man, I would pay more for this, even though it didn't just blow everybody out of the water, that's fantastic. That tells you not just how special the story is, but that the juice inside of it is really pretty good too. And maybe better than we kind of thought here as we gave it a review here in the TSPL. That's why I'm glad we're going to hold off. We're going to do a couple drops of water and whiskey in our glass. We're going to see what it does before we rate it on the Morse Whiskey Rating Code. We are not ashamed to put this one in the front, say we want to make sure we give it an absolutely thorough sip, maybe 3, maybe 10, maybe 2 or 3 pours, and we will come back as we dive into maybe the things we should be ashamed of and we aren't on this week's episode of Implicit Bias Radio. Implicit Bias Radio rolls on, and we are not ashamed that we are trying to make quick work of how we actually record this episode. It doesn't mean you're going to get shortchanged. It just means that we maybe aren't taking the lengthy sipping breaks that sometimes we take between segments. In the Mr. Lester's TSPL this week, we've got 2 great members of the crew at the bar. We've got Chef Willie Gaspard, the executive chef of Mr. Lester's Steakhouse and food and beverage director at Cypress Bayou Casino. Jonathan Broussard of Industrial Fabrication Services. in the chair, much like mine, the rustic renegade, the tan, the myth, the legend is working on it. He's also won the What Would You Pay championship belt chain here in the TSPL this week. And we are discussing the things that maybe we should be ashamed of and we aren't. And that in and of itself is a problem. Which brings me to the one thing that I think we as Americans actually are ashamed of right now. And it's coming to light, but it's one of those stories where we've actually seen someone, a very prominent media figure, say, oh, this was 63 years ago, and I don't care that these things came out. So I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to start just by asking Jonathan, Chef, Caleb, we are less than 48 hours after the initial drop of the JFK files. What have you seen? What are your thoughts? What jumps out at you from these files? I'll tell you, my first is disappointment, which I'll explain in a minute. My second is not surprised. My third is we now have understanding. Well, let's start at the bar as to kind of what you think and why. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, they're fighting over this one.
Well, I think it opened more intrigue for me because at my house, we love documentaries and JFK
A lot of
has
documentaries.
always been out there, and we've watched a ton of them. And you see some of the names that you've heard before. And for me, the intrigue is, does it go deeper than everything we've heard about or everything we've thought about? Are there more names that's going to come out? Now, admittedly, I didn't sit down and read a whole lot because I would like to, but I want to have the time to put in and really dig deeper in it with, what is it, 70,000 pages?
80,000 pages. And that's kind of where I wanted to start with is we are just now getting, as I said, we're recording 48 hours after this drop. We're just now getting some of the information. We're getting the proverbial tip of the iceberg here. So we're going to hold off a lot of this for a little while. But again, there are some things that we can glean from this already that are pretty impactful. Chef?
I'm gonna tie in on your show. The shameful. It's shameful if Lee Oswald did not do it, and he just took the blame for it all and ruined his life over this for nothing.
So one of the things that you are thinking from what you've seen
I don't
from the
think he
files
did it.
is that you don't think he
I don't
was
think he's the one who pulled the trigger.
the one.
No, he was just the scapegoat.
So I'm going to agree with you. And here's one of the things that I have gleaned. From the files, we know that the Russians notified the CIA months before the assassination that Lee Harvey Oswald was planning to assassinate President Kennedy. We know from the file that he met with Jack Ruby before the assassination. What we know, so when I say confirmation was one of the things that I said, what we know essentially from what we see in the files, and while it's not explicitly written there so far, is that Lee Harvey Oswald had every single hallmark of working for the CIA, of being an employee of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency.
Right.
Which means one of two things with Lee Harvey. Either the CIA put him up to it, which, let's face it, confirmation, we all knew they were involved. Anybody with half a brain knew that they were involved. Or not only was he the shooter, he was also set up. So it's possible that the CIA set him up to be a shooter. It's pretty much undeniable that the CIA set him up to get killed. Mm-hmm. That, from what little we have seen, it's out there. You can see all the documents so far where his name is mentioned, where people have said, well, he did it. We knew he was going to. They tried to communicate it to the Central Intelligence Agency, and they were like, yeah, whatever, and just let it go.
Right.
He was, and this is a great one, because much like pretty much everybody that the FBI, or pretty much everybody that something bad happens related to them in the U.S., they're like, oh, he was on an FBI watch list. That goes back apparently to the 1960s because they were watching Oswald months before this happened. Again, if you're watching him months before it happened, how is he your guy?
Right.
So some questions. Caleb.
So when you look into it more, so there's 60,000 pages that are available right now.
It's 60 or 80, just so
60.
we're clear.
There's
60, okay,
available
thank you.
right now.
60, I made
They're
the mistake
anticipating
earlier.
80,000 once the rest of it has been digitized.
Okay.
Now, the problems you run into is not all the pages are readable because of handwriting. They're not all categorized, so you don't know what agency they're coming from, everything else too. Some started being released in 2017. Under this executive order, it was a mass dump.
Yep.
Right? So it'll get sorted, cleaned, categorized as we continue and progress. One of the things that I found interesting, because I've always thought that either Oswald was working with the KGB, CIA, both, is about 2.5, 3 months before the shooting, he went in Mexico City, I think?
Yep.
To get a passport to go, not a passport, to get authorization, a visa to go into Russia. And the man that he met with, I can't remember his name right now, was known as a phenomenal case handler, one of the most dangerous case handlers from Russian intelligence in Mexico. When they described him, they said he lacks all morals, lacks all education, and lacks all manners.
The case handler or
Case
Oswald?
handler.
Okay.
The case handler. And now, the CIA in this entry said that as far as they know, they have no reason to believe that Oswald interacted with this man at any other point besides the request for this visa. Why would a Russian KGB or Russian CIA version of a case handler be handling a visa?
Because Oswald lived in Russia years before, and unlike pretty much any other American citizen, came back to the U.S. after basically renouncing his citizenship in the consulate in Moscow, got his citizenship back in the U.S. when he came back home.
So then there would be a reason, a connection to have someone of this level oversee that, which makes me think even more that he was a double agent
For the CIA.
for the CIA.
I don't disagree with you at all. I'm going to tell you the big takeaways that I had from this as I started to read some of the documents. Number one, confirmation. Anybody with a minor spark between the ears has thought that our CIA was involved in this in some way, shape, or form. After this, I have no doubt. Because while it doesn't say the CIA killed him, which is the disappointment that I have, we don't have, Professor Green from the grassy knoll with the rifle as the exact shooter. I would love for us to see that. I don't know that we're ever going to get it. That's the disappointment. But again, the confirmation is number one, we see so many references to the CIA. We see so many instances of where the president, John F. Kennedy, said, I am going to dismantle the CIA.
He tried taking apart the machine.
And moments later, he's dead, right? He was going to dismantle the financial institutions. He wanted to go back to a precious metal-backed currency and kick the Federal Reserve to the curb. He was essentially going against too many people in the system, which brings me to the part where I get depth, and it's this. We have been under an impression that we have a great ally in this world for a very long time. And what we now know from interactions that our Central Intelligence Agency had with another intelligence agency in the world, where our sitting president, the duly elected, only national official elected by the totality of the voting populace, the only one who is the chief executive of the executive branch, said, we are not giving nuclear secrets to this country. A CIA agent went behind his back and did this. We know this from the documents. You can go see it. You can go read it. It's all over X. You can go research it on the dump. So we have a foreign government that has a small collusion of people inside our Central Intelligence Agency who are desirous to override the willful elected official that the people put in office, a duly elected president. And you cannot tell me that the beholden faction inside of our own government is not still beholden to Israel today. That is in the papers. We gave nuclear secrets to Israel when the president said not to. One very specific CIA agent did it behind his back. It's there. Please don't believe us. Go read it. We have instances of cooperation that they were trying to not expose. In other words, the CIA didn't want anybody knowing that they were working with Israel. And now, this is maybe the other big one. We have confirmation that John F. Kennedy was going to force the Israeli government to register as a foreign agent to lobby U.S. lawmakers. They still have not today. They're the only country that does not, from the research that we've been able to conduct. Which means that there is a tie somewhere where instead of lawmakers being beholden to the people who elect them, they are now beholden to a foreign government. That can be a problem. That is what this confirms for me. Looking at it, we don't have necessarily a smoking gun. What we do have is significant probability that that is the case. By the way, I am a happily married. I am not in any way, shape, or form desirous to kill myself.
You carry
anything
a pager?
like that. I do not carry a pager. Do not carry a pager. We need to take a break, and it's not because somebody's trying to beat down the door here at the TSPL. Walker just gave me the finger. So we're going to come back. We're going to continue the conversation. We'll jump to Caleb. We will jump to Jonathan Broussard, and we will continue more of Implicit Bias Radio. We are not ashamed to wrap up hour one on this week's episode of Implicit Bias Radio. I'm your host, Kevon Bordelon. We are having a poignant discussion around the JFK files and what we have learned from the drop so far this week. Let me introduce you to the crew that's here with us in the Mr. Lester's top secret podcast lair. Let's start in the chair to my left. He is the Rustic Renegade. He is wearing the What Would You Pay championship belt chain presented by Box Drop of Lafayette. And judging by that face, that sip of whiskey with a couple drops of water and whiskey, it works, doesn't it, Caleb?
This tastes like what I remember. It's made it softer on the scent. It opened it up, less aggressive, but more flavor. I already wrote down my color.
You might change it.
No, it wouldn't change it. I know where I put it,
Okay.
but this does.
I think you and I may fall in the same spot then.
This does something special.
Okay, very quickly to the bar. Jonathan, you're on pour number 2. What do you think of this one?
The water, not much of a change to me.
Really? Okay.
Not much to me.
Chef, did you pour yourself another one over there?
I did. And it actually changed it. It's not as harsh.
Really?
At all.
Okay, so a little water and whiskey just absolutely softened it up. And I agree, because I did the same thing, just a drop or two in the glass, a little softer, a little more subtleness to it. It absolutely makes it a little more palatable. And that's not to say that it wasn't palatable at the beginning,
Right.
but it just gives it a much more welcoming hit
Easier to drink.
when it hits the mouth, and then the longer finish, I agree. And it makes the finish, to Caleb's point, a little more coordinated, maybe not quite as awkward.
Much more coordinated, much smoother. Not a 13-year-old, more like a 19, 20. It's like, I think I'm figuring this out.
Okay. All right. So we're going to do the Morse Whiskey rating code on this when Walker gives me about a 2-minute, 3-minute signal here at the end of this segment. But we were having too good of a conversation about the JFK files. And we kind of wrapped it up on the fact that there was a country involved. It might not have been the country that people thought. It probably wasn't Cuba. It probably wasn't Russia. Israel is mentioned a bunch in the files. Caleb, you said that brought us to a whole nother point of the discussion, meaning that there was somebody else who was heavily involved here in the United States.
You know, LBJ, many times when people described him, said that he was power hungry and would do anything for power. and you had a really great quote that I'll let you use, but this, I believe, helps tie in. He wasn't alone. I mean, as then the vice president, he had roles and abilities, but not to this scope, not to this scale. So I definitely think that this shows he wasn't alone. His hands are not clean. He wasn't alone. He was in the candy jar, and someone else was pulling his strings.
He was leverageable.
Very much. He was a tool to be used.
We're going to talk about how he was leverageable in just a second. First of all, Nixon is quoted as saying, and please, this is out there, you can go find it, that the difference between himself and Lyndon Baines Johnson was that they both wanted to be president, but Nixon wasn't willing to kill for it. That's the first part where you go, and you raise that eyebrow. He was leverageable, though, from this standpoint. There were a couple of investigations that were set to begin. One actually had already begun. One was beginning on November 3rd, 1963. The day that Kennedy was assassinated. They were both into corruption that pointed at Lyndon Baines Johnson. So when I say he's leverageable, someone might have been able to say, hey, we can take care of this by helping you out of this. Because literally, as it was described by a self-described hitman for the CIA, for Lyndon Baines Johnson, it was either kill or be killed. And he just happened to find a faction of the CIA that would align with him. He happened to find a faction of the mob. He happened to find a foreign government that would help him with this. And let's face it, if he was approached by one of them, he would have found a way out using them. But once you do, you are now beholden to them and they have you forever.
And I think that's more realistic. LBJ, smart. I don't think he was intelligent enough to plan this. I think that he was approached, latched on, and then in that spiral grabbed as everything else he could. Because when you do that kind of thing, you attract evil to you, right? People know this can be bought, this can be used, this is a tool for my benefit. Evil seeks out and smells evil. And at that point, we see the spider web come together.
This to me is where people need to be ashamed, because there are people today who are saying, oh, who cares if this government was involved? That was 60 years ago. The ripple in the pond from the dropping of this stone is about 5.5 feet tall today as a swell. It's still there. And that to me is the problem. The problem is this demonstrates what our own CIA would be willing to do to us.
Not just to us, to the leader of our world at the time.
Well, we elected him.
We did. And it was, if we can do this to him, imagine what we can do to you.
Jonathan?
It goes to the point that people don't think this could happen in this day and time to us again. But in the first segment, there were a lot of things you were saying about people identifying Lee Harvey Oswald and interviewing him before the assassination happened. It's kind of like the guy on the roof, right? There's videos of people saying, hey, man, there's a guy with a rifle on the roof, right? And this is current time.
He trained at a firing range where you have multiple government employees training at the firing. I mean, there's just too many connections beforehand. Remember, he had 3 bank accounts overseas. You're talking about a kid, number one. And we're talking about Jonathan Crooks, the attempted Trump assassin. You're talking about a kid who can't make it out of his parents' basement, who apparently has help from overseas with multiple bank accounts that are encrypted. And after the assassination attempt, he is killed before investigators can make it to his home. His home is cleaned by Winston Wolfe. There's nothing left. It is cleaned professionally for those who get the Pulp Fiction reference. It is cleaned as if someone has come in a very specific effort to remove any or all evidence. You wonder, Jonathan, this is a great pulling of the thread, if maybe we didn't just see somewhat of the same attempt, which is why you got people who say, hey, we saw somebody in the water tower. We saw, right? I mean, we've seen all this stuff and you go, did they really just go to the same playbook again? And you have to wonder, was it the same people? Chef?
I believe they'll do it again too.
Oh,
It'll
yeah.
happen again.
Well, or they'll try.
They'll try again. Absolutely. It's going to happen again before the 4 years is up.
I don't disagree that
They're probably
history,
going to try to kill all of them at the same time.
that would not surprise me. And you know what? Here's the thing. We may never know because it may be in a place where the media maybe isn't able to cover. I mean, let's be honest here. We all think that, you know, none of the media companies would be on the take. I find it highly suspicious, and we're going to leave it here because we'll go into some more. I find it highly suspicious that Trump held like 86 rallies or 80 plus rallies. CNN only chose to air one, and you're telling me that they happened to roll snake eyes on the one roll they had to happen to air that one? Don't BS a BS, sir. Anyway, let's dive into our rating of this Horse Soldier cask strength whiskey while we can here in hour one. The Morse whiskey rating code, yellow or red. I wouldn't drink it even if it was free. I highly doubt this will be a red. Yellow, I would only drink it if it was free. Green, I would buy this. Blue, I would seek this out. Let's start at the bar. Chef, we're going to start with you since you were the kind of one who went, I don't think so. And then you put water and whiskey in it. Red, yellow, green, or blue?
Yellow.
Yellow. Okay. You would drink it even if it was, or only if it's free, but that's okay. Jonathan, what about you?
It's a little bit outside my box, but
Okay.
It's a green to me.
Okay. Agreeing to you. I'm going to go ahead and go because Caleb has already written his down. And I'm going to call Caleb's for him. He wrote it as a green. He wouldn't up it to a blue. It's not bad enough for him where he's like, oh, it's only a yellow. It hit right in that spot of I would buy this. Am I correct, Caleb?
On the money.
You and I have been doing this a while,
Yep.
and you probably could have guessed that my rating was a green also.
I did.
To me, this is a straight green. I would absolutely buy this. I would absolutely drink it. This is one that, you know, if I see it, it's on the shelf, it's probably coming home with me, especially at this price and this proof, because I'll bet this makes a fantastic old fashioned. I'll bet it makes a great Boulevardier the way that I make it. A great Sazerac, even though it's not a rye, this would fit really well in that flavor profile.
Well, and price, proof, story, right? Because you can sit down and enjoy a glass with this and explain to them the same things we just did. Have you seen the movie 12 Strong? Have you seen this? Did you know that it's made from the same, the bottle is molded from the same steel as the World Trade Center Twin Towers? Like, there's a lot to this that makes it worth having on your bar.
Price, proof, story. Print the t-shirts.
That's a good idea.
Print the t-shirts because that, cheers to you, sir. Yes, Jonathan, thank you for ringing the bell because we needed a bell ringer on that one. Chef, in hour two, which we are getting really close to, we're going to talk about what you've got at Mr. Lester's this month, your $15 pours, $30 flights, and then we're going to start giving some stuff away. So I'm really curious as to what you've got for me because we've got some great stuff that we are going to give to our social media followers. We can't do it as a listener giveaway. We can do it on social media because we're not live, so we can't give it away live. But I'm telling you, on our social media, this is going to get crazy.
Every week, we're going to give something away.
Every week, we're going to give something away. And let me just tell you, Mr. Lester, he's bougie. He doesn't give away the cheap. You know that he's giving away the good stuff. We are not giving away the good stuff. We are going to have more fun in hour two. If your radio station does not get hour two of Implicit Bias Radio, call them, tell them you want hour two. Tell them that you want to find your favorite radio show / Saturday podcast for both hours, wherever you can get it, which means you might have to go wherever you get podcast, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X. It's your Implicit Bias Radio. More fun in hour two right after this. It's always more fun on hour two of Implicit Bias Radio. I'm your host, Kavan Bordelon. Let me introduce you to the crew here in the Mr. Lester's top secret podcast lair, coming to you from somewhere in downtown Lafayette, Louisiana. At the bar, we have the executive chef of Mr. Lester's Steakhouse, the food and beverage manager for Cypress Bayou Casino. He is Willie Gaspard, and Willie's going to fill us in just a minute on specials they've got going on and why, if you're a whiskey drinker, you want to go there. We've got Jonathan Broussard of Industrial Fabrication Services, who has helped us build a prominent sign here in the TSPL. I don't mean the Mr. Lester's neon sign, but I do mean the metal sign behind Caleb, which Caleb's looking at right now. Is that your good side, which is the underneath of your chin?
I think my good side is front and back.
I shouldn't have asked. I shouldn't have asked.
I was clarifying.
I should have known not to ask, and instead I did. And the second I said it, I knew it was a mistake.
Can't take it back.
Which, by the way, is reminiscent of an African juju bead that is derived from and picked out of a certain tree
That's right.
So
That's right.
that, for those who don't know the joke, that is a pick on Caleb and how he tastes whiskey. It's a very specific African rooibos tea that's harvested only in the fall on the south side of mountains in the country of. Yeah, that's typically where Caleb goes. And
I
again,
need to travel more.
he's usually correct. He's usually correct. All right, let's start here as we get into hour 2. We say it's always more fun. There's always more whiskey in hour 2. There's always more whiskey at Mr. Lester Steakhouse, Chef, because you guys, Mr. Lester himself is really trying to step out and do more for the whiskey drinkers here in Southern Louisiana. And man, so first of all, do we still have $5 pours of the Heaven Hill Grain to Glass series? Is that still available? My goodness.
That is going on to the end of April, but end of March, but we're gonna keep going through April until it's all gone.
And then you've got
Then I need to go back.
Then
fix that.
Then you've got some other bottles that are available. You've got a Redemption cognac cask.
Yep.
I mean, you've got some fantastic stuff at $15 a pour and $30 flights.
I have some Bibb and Tucker for $5 a pour. I have can't remember right now.
Chef, okay.
Do other places call you angry? Like, do other restaurants and other locations call you and they're like, "Hey, look, please don't do this to us"?
No, but I do have some enemies.
Well, you know what?
I do.
So do I, which is why I let Caleb have my 6, because Walker is always looking to try and stab me with a pen or something like that. Every time he loses and I tell him don't gamble and he gets mad because he knows I'm right, he gets upset and he wants to hurt me. I don't understand why. It's okay, though.
There's a place north of here. They don't like me too much.
Yeah.
That's Arkansas.
It's north. It's north. Not far from where you have your shop.
So, Chef, I've got to ask. We've talked about this before. I want to revisit this because I want to know. You source your beef from a very specific farm?
Yes.
Slaughterhouse?
It's Creekstone Farms out of Kansas.
But they're special. And I don't mean like short bus special. I mean like they are special, like they are unique and they have something that most places don't.
Absolutely. They do a la beef, which each cow that gets slaughtered gets preyed upon by a priest before it gets killed. All the cattle is finished 180 days on grain, which the industry standard is 90 days. Their beef coming out of their factory is 90% prime, 10% choice. They do not have any select cattle that come out of their facility, which the industry standard is about 20% prime, 70% choice, and 10% select. And then beyond there too, that no one wants to buy that anyways.
Yeah, agreed. That becomes pet food.
Yeah.
Becomes pet food and things of that nature.
Economy grade. There's all kinds of names for it. Taco Bell beef.
By the way, we can kiss that Taco Bell sponsorship goodbye. Yeah,
Although that might be the ticket we needed.
Yeah, it might be. Might be.
Casa Taco or Taco Casa, it's open for you.
The ground beef that you don't really want to know where it came from.
Agreed. But why is that important? I mean, why is that such a big deal? What does it yield?
So, and Creekstone also does, the only PETA approved kill facility in the United States. There's a movie about it, big documentary movie about it. And you can taste the difference. I can. You'd have to do it side by side. And the only comparison I have to it that a lot of people around the area would know is when you kill a deer that's run by dogs.
Yes.
And you eat a deer that was killed on a food plot. It's the difference there. Mm-hmm. The beef, I can taste that difference. It's subtle, more subtle than the deer, but you can taste the difference.
You can taste the stress in the animal when it is expired, when it is slaughtered, versus an animal that is not stressed. That is not only with regards to beef, it's with regards, as you said, to deer. It's
Absolutely.
really prominent with hogs in the wild. If you eat wild boar, you have to expire that animal quickly. If not, you can't eat it.
Right. And I got the privilege to tour the facility, and you can eat off the floor where they slaughter the cattle. It's very clean, pristine. The whole place is phenomenal. Like
What percent of steakhouses in the U.S. source their beef like this?
10%.
So
That
when
makes sense.
when we think about the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy Again movement,
Right.
this is the pinnacle of beef consumption for the Make America Healthy Again movement. When you really think about the quality of the meat that you are getting, and I'm not saying this just because he's on the show. These are facts. But if you're in the top 10% of steakhouses in the U.S., that's not a massive chain. These are privately held steakhouses.
Right. Absolutely.
You're not finding this at a steakhouse that has 250 locations across the United States. Even if they charge $70 for the steak, they can't get that much volume of beef. It's just not there.
I actually didn't know this, but I read a book, Anthony Bourdain's second book that he had.
Okay.
And in his book, he wrote, "There's nothing better than a Creekstone burger, mid-rare, on some brioche bun." Like, he even knew Creekstone beef. And
Wow.
right.
That is
Well,
that,
when you source the best materials, you get the best product.
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
and that goes to the quality of which y'all's staff, the culinary experience of what they produce, is in part due to the product and the beginning product that y'all select.
Right.
I will tell you this, and this is maybe how you say you can taste the difference. We as a family went to Italy a while back. Eating in Italy is very, very different than eating in the United States. My wife says she's gluten sensitive in the United States, goes to Italy, eats all the pasta, all the bread, all the stuff with gluten, has no issues. You eat and you don't feel terrible after eating. And you can eat as much as you think you can eat. And you get up and you are fine.
There's no preservatives in Italy.
But that's the same way you feel after a steak from Mr. Lester's. You feel like it is in harmony with your body and it works the way that it's supposed to work and feed you the way that it's supposed to feed you.
You're very right. I have never gotten the meat sweats.
Right.
Correct.
You know,
It's
Heavy fat ribeye.
antibiotics in beef. We don't.
Yeah.
Creekstone doesn't use any antibiotics.
That's
That's where the,
That's big.
That's where the
I never
meat
realized
come
I
that.
from.
never would have thought that antibiotics cause the meat sweats, but it makes sense. And I've never had the meat sweats after.
No, never.
It's true.
Like I try not to eat till I'm overly full, and it's you make it difficult.
Very.
But I've never been uncomfortable after a delicious steak, after any of y'all's sides or anything else.
That you're exactly right, because every time I've eaten there, I've always felt like, hey, I can go have another cigar with Renee. How
that
about
might-
a couple more glasses?
I'm
You
about
know?
to say that might be the whiskey talking, Jonathan.
Yeah.
That might
And
be
then
the
that's
whiskey
when I
talking.
feel overfull.
Yeah, that's when you end up at the
2 o'clock in the
anyway.
morning.
Yeah.
But it's never the food's fault.
Look, there's no shame when it comes down to eating a good meal. Being gluttonous maybe should be shameful. And that is not what we are attempting to portray when we go to Mr. Lester's. What we want people to see is just how special it is. Because it truly is a special experience in Southern Louisiana. It's a special experience for the entire state. It's the only restaurant where you can have a cigar in the restaurant in Louisiana. It's the only restaurant where you get that quality of beef. You guys are the only restaurant that sources in Louisiana from there, correct?
There is a couple in New Orleans. That
Okay.
do. I think a few Brennan restaurants.
Okay.
Do
Source from
Creekstone
there?
also too.
It's good to know. It's good to know. But the only place where you can put all those together at Mr. Lester's Steakhouse. So that is a fantastic reason to go there on top of the $5 pours, the $15 pours, the $30 flights. I mean,
They give you no excuse not to be there. Y'all really do. There is no excuse not to go. And I am remiss that it took me this long in my life to go and enjoy the meal and the atmosphere and everything else. Because if I'd have known what I know now, And when I was a newlywed, we'd have gone there, and every celebration we'd have gone there. And I just feel like we missed out.
It's unbelievable how many people in Lafayette don't even know about it. Like,
It is.
absolutely no clue where it's at.
I would love to say it's shocking, but it isn't shocking because Mr. Lester's is approaching its 30th birthday, which, by the way, birthday, and you guys are doing a lot with bourbon. Stay tuned to Implicit Bias. Birthday and bourbon, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You never know where some special things might show up. But when Mr. Lester's opened 30 years ago, fine dining in Lafayette, there were still a few restaurants that did it, but not nearly as many that tried to fill the niche between fast food and fine dining.
Right.
So it's not quite white tablecloth, but it's nice enough. Where literally they took elevated bar food and started charging almost fine dining prices for it, which meant that now all of a sudden the fine dining restaurants in Lafayette started upping their prices as well. You guys are still at a price point, which I find amazing for what you get. It is not going to be like going to a fast food restaurant in Lafayette. It's not going to be like going to one of those mid-range restaurants. But compared to what you get, I am shocked at how the value shows up compared to restaurants that serve the same type of food in Lafayette.
Right.
It's not even close.
I mean, the first time that we went and we sat down, and I got the check, I was sweating. I was nervous. When it came in, I was like, oh, this is half of Las Vegas. Like it was,
Right.
it was, in my opinion, affordable for the service, the meal, for everything, the ambiance. It was a phenomenal value when you think about the care that you get there in y'all's doors.
Appreciate that.
Okay, so we have got to talk about the theme of this show, which is not having any shame, and how we in the United States specifically, man, our glory is in our shame for too many people. And we see it all over the place. We see people who should be ashamed of their behavior thinking that it is their claim to fame, and for some it is.
OnlyFans. Sorry, I don't know where that came from.
I'm sorry. What was that, Caitlin?
I think I coughed and it sounded a lot like OnlyFans. I'm not sure where that came from.
You're going to have to explain for some of our listeners out there, and we're going to try and keep this as PG as possible.
I can keep it PG. This is people who glorify sin and loose morals for $5, or I don't know how much it costs. Walker, how much is a membership for that?
Walker sees the trap. He knows.
Your subscription's what, $15.99 a month? It's at Not the Moon.
Don't do that to poor Walker.
They give you a month free if you pay by the year. You know?
Jonathan, how do you know that?
But it's for people.
And
who
Jonathan walks right into it.
It's for people who want to be their own adult film stars, who don't understand the dignity, honor, and integrity of loving yourself first. It's for people who pride, gluttony, and dollars more than modesty and integrity. And there are many, many people in this world today that will sell pictures, images, videos of themselves and other people, regardless of what it does to their soul. They will sell pieces of their soul for $1.99 a month and think that it makes them an okay person.
And let's be honest, there's shame on both sides of this. Because
there are many that follow them and pay for that,
correct.
And do that, and they shouldn't.
Correct. And look, it is pervasive. I mean, let's be brutally honest. There is probably not a male in the city that we live in that has not been exposed to, seen in some way, shape, or form this type of production.
Well, the most addictive drug that is known to man is pornography.
And it is an addiction, and a lot of people suffer from it. But a lot of times, here's the difference. The difference is being proud of it versus being ashamed of it. Because if you're ashamed of it, you're admitting at some level that it's wrong. If you're proud of it and you flaunt it, and look, it doesn't just have to be OnlyFans. It can be anything that debases the human dignity that God has for all of us. I mean, you go look at some of the stupid things that were done. I'm going to argue that this really started with the Jackass series.
Oh, I knew you were going to go right to it, too.
That's where it started.
And just so you know, before it was Jackass, there was CKY. That's where I would say it started. It was Camp Kill Yourself. And these people did things that were horrible, and it was passed around on VHS.
It was a race to the debased.
Yes.
It was an absolute race to see who could do the dumbest, most jacked up thing, regardless of the moral compass of what they were doing, all for money. And look, we've gotten there today, but we've gotten to the point today where it's even worse, where we are now telling people, oh, don't be ashamed of the terrible behavior that you're engaging in. I'm not saying that we should not judge people based upon things they can't help. If there is something you truly cannot help, we should have mercy, we should have forgiveness, and we should look at each other as we all do, as we always say on this show, in the way St. Thomas Aquinas would want us to truly love, to will the good of other for the sake of other. When we, because we're all guilty of it, when we engage in a behavior and say, I know how messed up this is, but I am proud of it, and you have to accept it. That's the problem.
Well, that's the difference between being boastful and sharing your testimony. Testimony is, this is where I fell short, but it's through grace that God forgave. Testimony is, I was nothing, and God took nothing and made it into something. This boastful says, I did this. I made this. I earned this, and I don't care what God thinks because I'm not ashamed.
That's our implicit bias. Stick around. We've got more problems of the world. We'll talk a little bit more probably about a weekly whiskey here or there, maybe some of the ones that we're going to be giving away in the coming weeks in hour 2 as it continues right here on Implicit Bias Radio. Hour 2 of Implicit Bias rolls on. We are not ashamed to bring you this story. This is not to say that we should be, because this one is one where maybe the people who are talking should be ashamed. I'm your host, Kevon Bordelon, here in the Mr. Lester's TSPL. We've got the rustic renegade, Caleb Morse, at the bar, Chef Willie Gaspard, Jonathan Broussard of Industrial Fabrication Services. And gents, this is a story that we're kind of resurrecting a bit here, because this is a story that we seem to have forgotten about from just a few months back. We actually talked about the exploding pagers on this show. And one of the big questions was, how do you make sure that the right people have the pagers? I like to sit on these to make sure that we get a little bit out of this, to make sure that this actually survives vetting, if you will. Not just by us, but by those sleuths out on the internet who look at these things. And this one has survived vetting. We don't use 60 Minutes a lot, but this is not about what 60 Minutes didn't tell you, which is usually how this works because they don't always give you the whole story. It's about what they actually allowed on air. Walker, you want to roll that beautiful bean footage?
How did you convince Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel. Shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. And the world is our stage.
The world is our stage. Now, there's a reason why I went to this as the next story after the JFK Files. Who was it that got Hamas to buy pagers? And who was it that exploded pagers on the leaders of Hamas? Caleb, do you remember what organization did that?
Mossad.
Anybody see the connection here?
Pinky.
Okay. So first of all, for those who are listening, obviously that was a heavily masked voice.
Did you see that there's a little bit more? There's actually a 23-minute section of it. The second person that speaks, his accent is much more audible. This person, articulate, educated, less accent. This is more of what you would see as a field operative.
My point being, they've obviously got a real person, for those who can see, to speak under the condition of anonymity. Okay, fine. I love that you brought up the context of the way that the person was speaking. Because what I caught in the tone of that communication was pride in the ability to deceive millions, billions. The world is our stage. That is a huge comment, especially when you think about where we live with media today, with what is now coming out with the JFK files. Putting these two things together should be incredibly eye-opening.
Well, it goes to, they didn't start with pagers, right? They went with radios in the beginning, built into it, started with a larger pager. It was bigger, heavier, less concealable, wasn't as desirable, right? So what did they do? Marketing. They marketed it on YouTube, not on TV, on YouTube as the most innovative, packed with features, rugged, dust-proof and dirt-proof, water-resistant, and started getting people begging to order. And as other people begged to order, they said, we only sell in these quantities, we only do this, we only do that, and then priced themselves out of the market until the right customer approached. When the right customer approached, they didn't have production down pat. So then they went to Taiwan and said, you already produced this model. These are the small nuances we need changed. It'll be cost effective. You can do this, this, and this. We'll pay for the mold. And we have this many units pre-sold. You can sell the rest.
In other words, they knew their consumer so well that they could check yes and no boxes until they got exactly the people buying it that they wanted. The hubris in that. And look, it worked, which is the sad part. But the fact that they are not shameful, that they know this much, not, and if you think they only know this about Hamas, think again, because they're doing this to you, to me, to everybody here in the TSPL, to everybody in the United States, to everybody on the planet.
Well, Sun Tzu, right? If you know the enemy, know yourself, victory is assured. Well, if you view everyone as your enemy, victory can be assured. One of the superheroes that people love is Batman, right?
Yeah.
What does, come on, Walker, you have to know this. I'm going to drag you into the conversation. What does Batman have for every member of the Justice League and everywhere else? You don't know this?
Doesn't he have a plan to kill every member of the Justice League?
Every single person.
In case they go rogue.
Correct.
And he even has a plan
For himself.
for himself. But that's the difference. You have to have a plan for yourself. I have a feeling that what we're talking about, these people don't have a plan for themselves. They only have a plan for everybody else. And that's, again, pointing back to, we don't get to judge others. We have to be judgeful of ourselves. These people are not judgeful of themselves. They are only judgeful of everyone else, or judgmental of everyone else, if I can actually speak English instead of making it up.
I think the way the verse goes is, oh, how far did you fall, morning star? I think that's the way the Bible verse goes.
This is why, when we're looking at everything we're looking at today, we have to really take it in the context of history. Because these things are repeating themselves over and over and over and over and over again. This has happened before. Maybe not using this technology, but this philosophy has been seen in the past. Jonathan?
Absolutely. By those who have not learned history. As the great saying goes, those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. And we're in a world where people, as you said, they don't care about what happened in 1969. So, or they didn't want to know about it, you know?
Jonathan, we live in a world, and this is going to date everyone here in the TSPL except for Walker. We're in a world that doesn't care what happened in 1999. We live in a world where people don't, we live in a world where people have no clue. And those people are sometimes the most powerful because they allegedly have, 3 million followers on these things. So what we are doing is we are putting a weapon in the hand of dear God, forgive me for saying this. I should be ashamed that I'm going to say it. I'm not proud that I'm saying it, but it's the truth. Of an uneducated idiot, a useful idiot, because 3 million people will see whatever they say on this thing. It's why you've got people today who get upset and say, oh, history was changed. Political parties in the U.S. changed. No. There was one political party in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s that was burning crosses on people's lawn to intimidate them. And in the 2025 year, we have the same group of people lighting fire to people's cars to try and intimidate someone who is exposing corruption. They're the same people. They never changed parties. They're the exact same people. And uneducated idiots, people who have degrees from big universities, will try and tell you, oh, no. These parties swapped over somewhere in time where they now espouse what the other party did and they became the party. Nope. It's always been the same people. They just convinced you that they swapped.
And above all, they have no shame that they've done this.
None. No shame that they believe, and they will say, and we're going to go into this in the next segment, Caleb, I'm going to give you a second. They will say, we believe in the balance of power, but that one guy right there that nobody elected has all the power in the universe. It's the same people. All right, Caleb, I'm sorry.
Well, and how can we expect someone to understand what shame is when they think it's okay for a man to wear a dress and be on stage and for little girls to share a bathroom with a grown man?
Look, here's what I will say. Long comedy tradition of guys in drag making fun of themselves for adults. Big difference when they do it in jest versus doing it in front of children. What 2 consenting adults want to do, what 10 consenting adults want to do inside of a building on their own, that is between them and their God.
Close the door, keep it private.
I have no issue what you want to do with another consenting adult because that's between you and your God. I know what I think of it, but it's not my right to tell you what you get to do. Drag a kid into it, we got a problem.
Yeah, very different story at that point.
We're not going to be proud of that. We are not going to claim that glory in what should be shameful. We are going to claim that it is shameful for Walker to continue giving us the finger, even if it's the 1-minute finger. We'll come back. Walker, is this going to be the final segment or penultimate segment next?
Penultimate.
Penultimate segment of Implicit Bias Radio right after this. Penultimate segment. That means the second to last segment of Implicit Bias Radio for this week. I'm your host, Kavan Bordelon. We've got a great crew here in the Mr. Lester's TSPL. That's the top secret podcast layer. For those who are new to the show, in the chair like mine, he is the Rustic Renegade. At the bar, we have Jonathan Broussard of Industrial Fabrication Services and Chef Willie Gaspard. Chef, do I get to tell people some of the bottles we're going to give away?
Of course you can.
Or do you want to tell them?
I think you should.
Because you don't remember.
I don't remember.
That's what I thought. Okay.
I don't want to hear this. Can I turn off my headset?
I don't remember what I did this morning.
I know, Caleb.
I've been up since 4:15.
I know why, Caleb, you don't want to hear this because you're not eligible to win.
It's heartbreaking, okay?
So look,
what if I change my name?
We are still in March. Still in March. This is going to start in April. We are going to call it is April. We're your fools promotion because we're giving this stuff away. Every week, we're going to give away a bottle. It might be a bottle of 4-Gate bourbon. It might be a bottle of 4-Gate rye. It might be a bottle of Jack Daniel's Sinatra edition. It might be a bottle of Buffalo Trace. It might be a bottle of Elmer T. Lee. This is just what we have in hand. Correct, Chef?
That is correct.
Am I of the correct understanding that even more might come in?
We do have more.
We're gonna fill that in later. We're gonna wet your palate. We're gonna tease your palate with what we are going to give away. You'll find it on our socials, courtesy of Mr. Lester, because he loves you.
Thank y'all so much for the ability and opportunity to do this kind of thing for so many people too, because this is For people that don't get to see this kind of variety and see these names on a regular basis, here's your chance to win one.
And we're going to tell you some of the stuff that we're actually holding back that's only going to be available at Mr. Lester's. Because that's going to be really special. There's some stuff there that I'm telling you, you might have seen a picture of it somewhere, true unobtainium, that we'll have there at Mr. Lester's. And we know how Mr. Lester likes to price that stuff. So we'll stop right there. As we dive into some of the other things that we should be ashamed of, that maybe we are not today in the United States. This one is one, and look, I'm not going to pretend that I sent this out to the crew because we're going to hit 2 more topics before the end of this week's episode, and there was so much to talk about. But this one just popped up, and I can't let it go, and it tells me we need to talk about it. So the United States Constitution is set up in a very unique way. Power of the people is not vested in one branch of government for a very specific reason. It is vested in 3, where there is a balance of powers. But certain responsibilities are not powers. They are the responsibilities as written in the Constitution of the offices. For example, no one is going to a judge, a federal district judge, and saying, hey, judge, the ability for the United States Congress to propose and present laws to the President of the United States should be enjoined or stopped because we don't think they have that power. Everyone knows that is the responsibility of the office. It is not a power, it is a responsibility. But today, we have district judges who are effectually receiving, taking, and enjoining, in other words, trying to stop the president from actually fulfilling the responsibilities of the office. The president of the United States is well known as what? What's another moniker for the office? 3 words. Jonathan, you got it?
Commander-in-Chief.
Commander-in-Chief, which means he gets to do what? Tell
a lot of stuff.
Well, okay, let's talk
Lead
about
the people in green.
Let's talk about the military.
Yeah.
He
controls the military.
He controls and commands the military. We now have a judge who says, nope, you don't get to do that. Because I say so. Because now we have a policy that is very popular amongst the American people with regards to the American military that is being enacted. Somebody went to a judge and the judge said, nope, you can't do that. Does anybody know who the USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development, reports to? Anybody know what branch of government that is part of?
Well, that would be executive, wouldn't it?
Who would be in charge of the executive branch? Who's responsible for it?
Oh, my word.
That would be the president of the United States.
Presidente.
So now you have judges who say, this is not an issue of checks and balances. You have judges who say, I can stop you from doing your job.
Is all this about people who are saying that they can't stop funding for certain things because it makes other people unhappy and uncomfortable, and that they should have more of our taxpayer money, even though they're not taxpayers?
Caleb, it's more than just funding. It's more than just funding. This is about trying to hamstring the duly elected president of the United States. Please don't believe this. Chuck Schumer actually came out and said this in an interview. The reason he voted for the continuing resolution, Trump's budget, which a lot of people on one side of the aisle didn't like, the reason that he voted for it was so that judges, and he admits this, please don't believe us, so that judges can try and enjoin. That is the strategy. We are going to try and take the duly elected president of the United States and stop him from handling the responsibilities of the job. And they're proud of it.
Well, everybody wants their leader to have power until they disagree. Right? We can disagree with the former presidency, with other presidents and everything else. When they elected him and they were happy with it, they didn't disagree. But now all of a sudden, my panties are in a bunch and I'm not happy.
Caleb, your panties are in a bunch a lot. We hear this from your wife all the time. It's why she tells us you're always looking for a new type of underwear. We're not going to talk about your underwear on this show.
I found
I'm
a
just
pair
saying.
of love.
I didn't want to hear that. Don't want to know that. Don't want to know what it is. Because they're...
And I'm free.
Okay, ring the bell. That was funny. That was well set up. I was going to take that to a totally different bad place, and you... Very well done.
Yeah, I
okay,
tried.
Jonathan.
So in the last few years, we heard a lot about federal judges in the media sponsoring
Yep.
court sessions against former or now standing president. But I think the shamelessness of these guys forgets two words that they should be endowed with when they take those offices as judges. And those words are without prejudice. So a lot of what happens these days
Oh, absolutely.
is quite the opposite, right?
And if you look at the record of one very specific judge who, in effect, tried to recall all the USAID stuff, all of these things, this judge has almost never ruled in favor of the Trump administration. He has ruled in favor of the opposition every single time. So it's like, okay, it's not that he's always in favor of the plaintiff. He's always in favor of who is opposing one particular side of the aisle, regardless of whether it's a positive or a defensive stance that they take, or a plaintiff or a defensive stance. It's, oh, wait, hold on. You agree with me? Or you agree with that particular former past president? I'm going to go with you. And this is how you know how bad it is. We are less than 3 full months into this new administration, and this president has been enjoined more times already than the past administration was enjoined in 4 years combined. And people will say, oh, well, he took more action. No, they're just judge shopping, and the same judges are getting these cases somehow and filing with a judge that they know they're going to win. These are judges who need to be removed because they are not being judicious. They are being activists, and that is not their role. Therein lies the problem.
They're learning to control the game.
Which brings us to game theory. Anybody know what game theory is here in the TSPL? Jonathan, you ever heard of it? Chef?
Nope.
Okay. Caleb, you and I are kind of sharing a brain sometimes. The shortest explanation I can give you of game theory is this. You have to consider outcomes with regards to two parties. When neither party cheats at the game, the better party wins. When one party cheats, the lesser party cheats, they win significantly more often. Well, when one party, then the better party, the more logical, the more factual, then decides to cheat as well, or expect the cheating, the party that is more adept, more accurate, more factual, more logical almost always wins. But they have to understand and expect the cheating in the process. And they have to plan for the cheating. And that is what we are seeing, because a lot of people may not realize the reason that some of these baby steps are taken, it is to expose the cheating so that game theory can actually come forth and win. We are playing a little bit of game theory here. We have one more story, and this might be the real reason we're seeing all this stuff this week, because this is a game changer, and it should be shameful what academia thinks of itself over this when we come back in the final segment of this week's episode of Implicit Bias Radio. Wrapping up Implicit Bias Radio, I'm your host, Kavan Bordelon. Caleb's pouring more whiskey for what should be a whiskey tasting. Caleb, you should be ashamed of yourself.
There is a little shame in there. There is.
Okay, at least you recognize it. That's all we ask, right? It's all we ask. That is the Rustic Renegade. At the bar, we've got Chef Willie Gaspard, the executive chef of Mr. Lester Steakhouse. We've got Jonathan Broussard of Industrial Fabrication Services. I'm glad we've got Justin. I'm glad we've got Jonathan, because Jonathan actually knows a thing or two about building, construction, things of that nature. And we are going to talk building and construction and why academia should be ashamed of itself. So I'm going to start with this statement. I'm going to make a lot of people mad. and I don't care. If you are an archaeologist and you subscribe today to this theory that slaves were carrying these massive blocks and that's how they built the pyramids, you're a clinical idiot, you're a moron, you should not be teaching in a university, and you have absolutely zero understanding of not just what you think you know, you have no understanding of what you do know. Here's why. Because in the last 48 hours, a new scientific discovery has become public. And it is this. The pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Khufu, is literally the tip of the iceberg here. An iceberg only shows 10% of what is above water. That pyramid is what, 600 feet high?
I believe so, roughly, yeah.
Okay. What's underneath it now, according to archaeologists in Egypt, please don't believe me on this, go look this up. It's fascinating. There are structures that they have identified that go 1,800 feet under the earth and then go down another 80 meters, another 240 feet. So 2,100 feet under the pyramids are structures
And
wells with staircases.
Man, you just made something click, too, from a Bible study that I'm doing where we're discussing the Nephilim, the Rephilim, and I think they call the Emim. And Genesis 6, the sons of God took favor and came into the daughters, and out of them came the men of renown. The men of renown, the men who changed things, the people that were educated smarter than the others because of a predisposition. When you look at the education level to build something that deep.
Don't tell me these people were morons.
No.
Don't tell me
from
these
it.
people were doing this with camels and hemp rope and wooden pulleys.
Far from it.
I mean, now you have to think about mining capability, which we can mine deeper than that. Chef, you were talking about the salt mines on Avery Island, right? Those go down pretty deep.
I believe 5,000 feet.
I've been down 1,800 in one of the mines because of a job.
My father worked down there for 30 years.
That is an architectural and engineering feat in today's world.
Yes. And they use machinery.
Oh, do they use machinery?
Big machinery.
Yeah,
For
they,
those-
they deconstruct it,
giant-
reconstruct it downhole.
So they deconstruct, they reconstruct, and they never bring it up. You know why? Because it deteriorates in a salt mine.
Absolutely.
It just goes to nothing. So when you think about going that deep into the earth, you have to know about the you have to know what's down there. You have to know the geology before you dig.
Yeah, you have to know the
You are
materials
not
are going through.
you are
core
not
pressure.
digging those holes and saying we're going to put I don't even want to think about the weight of the Great Pyramid. Millions of tons of weight on top of this and be okay.
Well, and that's part of why they have 6 independent pillars, wells, because they were hollow, with spiral staircases on top of 2 80-meter, I think was it 80 meter or 80
Cubes.
feet?
I think it's 80 meters because they did everything
80
in
meter
meters.
cubes to support the weight. I mean, that's a foundation is what that is.
Jonathan, you deal with some building of things. This is not easy.
Nothing to this level. What amazes me is how old are the pyramids? What's the estimate of the ages of the pyramids at this day and age?
Well, they like to tell you 2,500 years. What I'm going to say is this, and I'm going to look directly at the camera because I'm speaking to every archaeologist who claims that they're 2,500 years old. You don't know about how old this is after this because you can't build this. This is one of those math problems where you go, if you have 1 million people and you're moving these blocks and digging these holes, say it takes an hour to get this, you don't have enough time.
Well, that's also goes to we're thinking that the average person is one size, right? If we look at the bed of Og was roughly 19 feet tall, 6.5, 7 feet wide. That's what the Bible tells us. That's a big son of a gun. Goliath was 10 or 11 foot
yeah.
tall.
Giants were real.
Yeah,
back
they
then,
were very
right?
much real.
Yeah. Well,
right? So they
even
can
if you
move.
use that base for our premises, 2,500 years, the fact that this is still standing today beneath the surface of the earth, what you can see, and it has been constructed by primeval man.
Let's take it here. Let's say they're 10,000 years old. Look at what archaeologists all
Even
around
more
the
amazing.
world are. No, look at what they're telling us was existing 10,000 years ago. Don't tell me that they were doing this, literally taking their thumb and going, I can't speak. We don't
Yeah,
have language.
no,
I mean, we don't
no.
have civilization.
We
Come
obviously
on.
had a reset multiple times.
That.
And think, I mean, look at when the Bible talks about the Tower of Babel. Do you think uneducated, ignorant people who ran around with sticks and tried to build fire with rubbing sticks together could do that? No. We look at the ziggurats and everything else that we have. These people had a level of knowledge that we today haven't caught up to. Look at where we've come in the last 100 years, right? So the booming 20s, the 30s, the knowledge and the improvements we had during that period in time. And we've been stupider since? Yes, we've been stupider since.
Obviously, with
Imagine-
the mastery of the English language right there. Stupider.
Stupid. Well, that made sense to me. More stupid. So I mean, look at what we've come to. Imagine where we began.
Look at some of the ancient structures and the way that stones have been joined. There are some stones so large in Greece that we don't have equipment today that can move them.
And the joints are so fine that not even water can pass between them.
Take it down to a piece of paper. I had the windows replaced in my house. That is a whole different story. I might not go there. I'm definitely not going there this episode. I might go there on another. They are building windows for a normal home. And when you watch them install them, they don't fit within 4 inches on each side. Well, sometimes 2 to 3. They don't fit within 2 to 3 inches on each side, 4 to 5 inch margin of error, and they find a way to mask it, cover it up. And you're telling me that we now have disclosure that we have these structures underneath the pyramids in Egypt, and we allegedly now have the history all figured out? You know what we don't have figured out, apparently? Timing of the show, because Walker's telling me we're done. More weekly whiskey, more solving the problems of the world, more of hopefully you joining us for a relaxing conversation, and more whiskey that you're looking for at Mr. Lester Steakhouse. It's all coming your way when we see you again in 7. Find us on all of our socials. Please like, follow, share your Implicit Bias Radio. Cheers.